so this next couple recipes uses lentils, and so lentils are part of the legume family, or very similar in the same family as beans. They're a great substitute for meat, and because they're a good source of protein, but at the same time, since they're a plant, they also have really good sources of fiber, and fiber itself really helps to lower cholesterol, and lentils themselves don't have a lot of those saturated fats and things that beef has that causes your cholesterol to spike up like that, and so they're a really good substitute for some of those meats. And so what we'll be doing today is showing you a couple different recipes of how to use lentils in place of ground beef. And so we'll be making some lentil tacos, some lentil burgers, as well as using lentils in place of ground beef for some of those things for a spaghetti sauce. And so whenever you buy your lentils, it's important to put them in a strainer and check for any stones that may have got packaged in with them. And if you find any stones, then you just pick them out. And so we measured all the lentils out that we need for our recipes, and we'll just check through it. And then if we don't see any stones or anything after that, then we'll keep them in the strainer and then just rinse them with water to get off any of the impurities or debris with them. So, and then if you have a large batch, then you can use a spoon to kind of get the ones up from the bottom and bring them to the top so that you can wash those with some water too. And so the nice thing about lentils is, instead of beans where you have to soak them overnight before you cook them, is that lentils themselves, you don't have to soak them before you cook them. You just wash them, and then you'll boil them for about 20 minutes or so, and then they'll be ready to use for your recipes, as opposed to beans where it takes almost a whole day of soaking before you can be ready to cook them.
Okay, and so what you want to do is make sure that the lentils have a good, say, inch of water on top of them. Alrighty.
So now that we have the lentils in the pot with their water, we can place it on the stove for them to boil. And so to cook lentils, what you want to do is turn it on to high, and you'll want to bring them to a boil. And then once it's boiling, you'll turn the heat down to low and then cover the pot with a lid, and then just let them simmer. And you usually want to let them simmer for about 20 minutes or so. And then at that 20-minute mark is when you'll want to check them to see if they've softened up a little bit and are ready and cooked.
And the other thing about lentils is that they're very inexpensive, and so you can buy them in bulk. And of course you do get it from the food bank. And sometimes you can cook 3 batches and make 3 different types of meals. So that way you don't have to do other cooking during the week, but you can also, once they're cooked, they keep in the refrigerator for a week. You can freeze them, and then they can keep in the freezer for 3 months. And if you don't feel like using your lentils this week, you can keep them in a jar. I have mason jars, but you may have some spaghetti sauce jars. Just clean them out, because you want them to be sealed tightly so that you can keep them in your pantry, and they will even last for a year. And if you don't have any jars, Ziplocs will do just the same thing. And so again, lentils are just so versatile. I think they're underappreciated and underutilized, and they have so many health benefits. So we will show you how to prepare wonderful meals with them.
Lentils are boiling. We'll go ahead and turn down the heat to low, and then we'll get our lid and cover off the top with the lid to keep the heat in there. And then in about 20 minutes we'll check them and make sure they're soft and see if they're cooked. Okay, so now that the lentils have been simmering for about 20 minutes, we're going to go ahead and check. And so whenever you check your food, you want to have a little bowl and your own spoon away from it to keep it sanitary. So you get a little bit of scoop of the lentils, put them in the bowl, and then you'll go ahead and taste test them. And so what you're checking for with lentils is to make sure that they're softened up and no longer hard. And so these seem pretty good. I think they're softened up quite a bit, and so I think they should be ready to use for the rest of our recipes.
And if you notice, it looks like all of the water has boiled away, but there is still some. And so what I like to do is save the water because that has some of the nutrients from the lentils that have that are now as part of the water. And you'll see with some of our recipes, especially the lentil tacos, you need to add water, and so it would be much better to use the lentil juice. I also keep it in my refrigerator, and whenever I'm making whole grains, like even if I'm making rice, to have the juice with my brown rice, it just adds a nice flavor, or really any kind of grain.
All right, so now that the lentils have finished cooking and boiling, we'll go ahead and strain them out. And then like we were saying, we want to save some of the water or the juice in the bottom since that still has a lot of good nutrients in it. And so you'll want to put a bowl under your strainer to catch all of that. And so there we go, we have the lentils strained out, and then that's the rest of the water that we boiled with it and we'll use for later. Alright, so a lot of our recipes call for onions, and so I'll walk you through some of the steps on how to cut an onion properly. And so since onions are round, the first thing you want to do is cut off the end. And so the end you want to cut off is the top of it. So this is the bottom where all the roots are. And you'll cut off the top to give you a nice flat surface to cut with. And so now that it's nice and flat, you put it on the flat end, and then you cut it in half from there. So, and then once it's cut, then it's a lot easier to peel, and so you get that first layer under there, and then peel that off with the rest of the skin. And once it's all peeled off, you can throw that into the treasure bowl. And then we'll go ahead and peel the other half. Okay, and then so to dice the onion, you'll take the onion and then you'll make kind of angled cuts into it, and then just continue with the cuts all the way throughout the onion. And then whenever you're cutting, it's important to make sure to keep your fingers in line with the claw so that you don't cut any fingers. And so the claw really helps keep your fingers out of the way of the knife. And so we're just moving down the onion. And then you really want to make sure to keep the root on, because the root keeps the onion together as you're cutting it. And you can go ahead and spin it around to make the cutting on the rest easier. Okay, and then now that it's cut all the way through, you can go ahead and cut the root off and then put that into the treasure as well. And then since it's cut, you'll go ahead and take a couple pieces off, and then you'll have them on the cutting board, and then just move down with your knife to cut them and dice it up. And so whenever you're cutting, if you have a chef's knife, you can use kind of a rocking motion with it, or any other knife. It's important to make sure you're kind of going back and forth with it, more like a sawing motion as opposed to just going straight down with the knife to cut it. Okay, so now for the lentil tacos, after the lentils are already cooked, all your vegetables are chopped, and you've got your spices set aside. You can go ahead and start sauteing your onions. And so, like we said before, we chose the red onions because those are darker in color and have more of those phytonutrients, or some of those health benefits of the onions. And then you'll just throw them in and cook for a couple minutes. Kind of like with the other yellow onions or the white onions, you cook until they are a little bit translucent, so like the white softens up and looks a little bit more clear. And then we'll also add a pinch of salt as well too, to kind of layer the flavors. And then we'll go ahead and throw in the peppers. So like we've shown before in the other videos, you open up a little hole in the middle of the plate. You add some olive oil, and then you throw those in, and then you can also add a pinch of salt too to them. And then so this will all cook for about 5 minutes or so. You just want to soften up the vegetables a little bit, and if you like crunchy vegetables in your tacos, then you can cook them for less time. But if you like them softer, then you can cook them for a little bit longer. And so after these finish cooking, the next things we'll add are the spices and then the garlic. So just turn the heat down a little bit because it seems like they're cooking a little bit fast. And then for the spices, the recipe shows 2 teaspoons of the ancho chili powder, but sometimes that's hard to find. So what we did in place of that was just 2 teaspoons of regular chili powder. And then if you want the smoky flavor that the ancho chili powder gives, then you can just add another teaspoon of the chipotle powder, and it gives it that smoky flavor and kind of sweet flavor that the ancho chili has. And I think these are all good, so we'll go ahead and open up the little hole, put the oil down, and then we can add our spices and add our garlic. And then you just stir them in. It seems a little dry, so we'll add some more oil. And then you just cook all those until they're aromatic and you can kind of smell the flavors. And if you added chipotle, you can smell a lot of that with the cumin as well too. And then we'll just let that heat back up, and then we'll add our lentils, and then the final 2 ingredients with the hot sauce and the tomato paste. Go ahead and add the lentils. And at this point, when you're cooking with this heat, some of the lentils may dry up a little bit, and so that's when you can either add water, or since we saved some of the broth that we boiled the lentils in, you can add that, and it helps them retain their moisture and kind of give some of that texture and feeling of like ground beef would, and some of the juiciness. And then while you're doing it too, just kind of mashing them up, and then the mashed lentils gives a little bit of that ground beef texture that you would normally get. And then you want to turn the heat down a little bit too, now that everything's cooked, and you're just kind of warming the lentils with the spices and mixing them in. Alright, so now we just add the last two ingredients, so the tomato paste and then the hot sauce. And so you want about 3 tablespoons. This is a half, so I'll do 6 of these. And then one more. And then we'll also add the hot sauce, which is 2 tablespoons. And you can try different hot sauces. You don't have to do any specific brand. The recipe itself it says that they use Cholula, but it's also fun to try some different hot sauces. And if you like it spicier, try and put some spicier hot sauces in too. Okay, and then you just stir it in and keep mashing as they're doing that. And then after that's all mixed in, then they're pretty much ready to go. And if it seems like it's still dry, then you can keep adding in some of the broth or some of the water that you need to as well. And it helps keep them moist. Okay, and then once they're all good, you can load them up onto a tortilla. And so if you're wanting to try a healthy substitution, you can do whole grain tortillas, or there's like some quinoa tortillas too, and that those whole grains really lower the glycemic load of the tortillas too, so that it doesn't raise your blood sugar as much, especially if you have diabetes. And then the lentils on top of it with all their fiber as well will help lower the glycemic load of the whole meal as well too. With after you have that, then you can top it with whatever you usually enjoy topping your tacos with. So we have some guacamole and some more red onions just to give it a little bit of a crunch. If you enjoy sour cream, then a healthy alternative to sour cream would be non-fat Greek yogurt as well too, and that has a lot of those like probiotics or those bacteria that are good for your gut too, that sour cream wouldn't have. And surprisingly, it tastes really similar to sour cream. So those are some good options to add as well.
Okay, so here is our treasure. And I'm so glad that we prepared these meals for you, because this will go nicely into my half-empty treasure bag, which I keep in my freezer. So you can see I had some wilted celery because I didn't eat it fast enough, so it went into my treasure bag. And you can see it's all full of onion skin, and so I will just add this to my treasure bag, and you know, this weekend might be time to make more soup stock. Okay, to your health, just remember that healthy food can taste delicious and craveable. Use the spices that your family enjoys. Use olive oil so that your body can absorb the nutrients, the food nutrients, the phytonutrients to really improve your health. So I do hope that you find some of these suggestions helpful. Have a good day.